Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kip Adams with me today as we come back and recap a little bit from G Day and talk a little bit about what's going on with Georgia athletics. Kip and I did a podcast pretty much right after G Day, so if you guys didn't see that, make sure and go check that one out. Kip, how is this Thursday afternoon treating you as we continue on in the off season and get officially a week away from the NFL draft?
Yeah, I'm ready for the draft. I'd love to tell you I'm just sitting here enjoying the NBA playoffs so far, but I'm ready for us to be put out of a misery here so far with the Hawks. But yeah, it's post G Day. Some people might think that might be a lull in what we do, but I mean we got a lot going on. Like you said, next week with the draft, but this recruiting, football in general, that transfer portal's been active and should be active next week as we approach that May 1st deadline. So there's a lot going on with Georgia athletics. So I think we are, we're staying busy, and so that's good for us, good for our jobs, and good for this podcast.
No doubt about it. Never a dull moment. You can promise that when it comes to Georgia athletics, that there's always something going on. So to start things off, Kip, I thought it'd be a good idea to go back and talk about G Day and just as we sort of move on from spring practice, kind of recapping what really stood out to us from G Day. And I'll start with you, Kip. What, especially a few days now removed from G Day, has kind of remained with you or something that really stuck out to you that, now that we have officially ended spring practice, still sort of at the front of your mind when it comes to this team getting ready for the 2023 season?
We're all wanting to see obviously the quarterbacks, but just the offense in general. And I'll be honest, it looked pretty familiar. And we knew kind of that Mike Bobo would be running a version of Todd Monken's offense, that there would just, not be a completely new look out there. But, when you saw Oscar Delp lining up out there with Brock Bowers on the first team offense, and you saw him flexed out some, and then I think for a couple snaps, you saw Lawson Lucky, even though he's on the other team, you saw him, three tight ends there flexed out. It kind of made me think, okay, they're not Washington's off to NFL, and obviously, his presence will not be replaced in this offense. But I don't think that tight end position is going away anytime soon. And I think a lot of 12 formation and probably some 13 formation will still be, out there. And I think there's just a lot of different ways that they're going to be able to attack defenses. And honestly, Carson Beck looked like he was ready to do most of the attacking for Georgia right now. So I think, there's no starter named right now, and it's not going to happen probably anytime soon. But we all had to come away from that just thinking, all right, I think we have a clear leader in the clubhouse for QB1 for Georgia.
I think for me, a couple things, and I think we talked about this on the podcast right after the fact. One, they are so deep at wide receiver. I mean, if you and we decided we're going to carve out, a 3-receiver set that we feel good about and kind of trade it back and forth, you could come up with some pretty good groupings and feel good about it, even leaving off, a few different guys as you go. I mean, they're just so deep. I think that those freshmen, they're probably not going to see a whole lot of playing time again because the position's so deep. But I really liked what we got to see on Saturday. You had Zeed Haynes making a really nice catch on the sideline. You had Tyler Williams making a catch and streaking across the middle for some extra yards. I think those guys are really, really talented, and they're kind of going to run into a situation where it's just, where do you play? Where can you get on the field? Maybe special teams and trying to make some plays in scout team. And then on defense, just it's sort of in the same vein. There are so many young, talented defenders that I thought showed flashes. Damon Wilson completely, blew right by Chad Lindbergh for a sack at one point in the scrimmage. Samuel Mpemba made some plays. C.J. Allen was all over the place. Jordan Hall making a couple deflections, especially with a guy like Jordan Hall, having lost Bear Alexander, just knowing you have young depth that, he's not going to be able to start right away, but you could see how talented he was as young as he is. When you recruit the way Georgia has these last few years, none of this should be a surprise, but it's definitely a pleasant sign when, especially these guys going through spring for the very first time, if they're able to even show the minimal kind of flash and can show you what they could be. I think that has to make you feel really good. Some of these guys are going to have to play roles, and some may have bigger roles as the year goes on. But I think if you're a Georgia fan, you should be excited about what you saw, particularly when you look at those young defenders. Man, there's a whole lot of talent aboard.
Yeah, and that's the one aspect where I kind of did not try to take too much from it was the play of Ernest Green and Austin Blasky, outstanding protection. But then you'll get the score. You see, the offense put up a lot of points, but that defense didn't have Michael Williams out there, didn't have Jalen Walker out there, no Marvin Jones Jr., no Smile Munden. You have to remember that when you're looking at some of the young guys making plays, but also the offense being able to, to pass the ball, kind of at will, that there are a lot of major parts of this defense that were not on the field. And I think if we're talking about affecting the quarterback, three of those guys, especially Michael, Marvin Jones Jr., Jalen Walker, I think those guys are going to probably be, expected to be in the top 2, top 3 pass rushers when all is said and done, or what Georgia wants to do when those guys are healthy. So overall in defense, you have to remember that. And at the same time, with the offensive line, how well they were able to play, you have to remember that maybe, it's everything's not as bad as it seems. Everything might not be as good as it seems. And so if you're Stacey Searles, you have to go back and look at the film, but also tell them, like, guys, don't think you went out there and beat the ones out there. There are some guys out there that are probably going to test you a little bit more than what you saw today. So I think you have to be really excited, though. That still should, even with those guys out, it's probably one of the best defenses in the country, and then offense looked really, really good. So I think if anyone's excited right now, it's probably Mike Bobo. I think he has not really had this kind of opportunity to field an offense with this kind of talent, and at the same time know that he's going to have an elite defense that puts him in great situations this fall.
Yeah, and with the talking about Bobo, I thought it was kind of interesting. Carson Beck afterwards was, you can tell he was kind of excited. He's like, "Yeah, Mike was, Bobo was dialing it up today," and that's got to be a good sign for what could come because this spring was a lot about learning, a lot about being on the same page. You kind of established that, and it'll be interesting to see what we see going into the summer, but especially in fall camp when we can actually watch these guys. Wanted to answer a question real quick from the comments. Craig Lawson said, was Pierce Spurlin out injured or did he not enroll early? He did enroll early, broke his collarbone. I think that was the end of the first week of spring. So he was not available, but I believe he should be back definitely by fall camp. And I think the thought is this summer he'll be able to come back. And you talk about a loaded tight end room with him, with Lawson Lucky, what he was able to do. And then obviously Brock Bowers. Kind of an embarrassment of riches, especially when you consider, these next few years, what they could be adding to that room as well.
Yeah, Todd Hartley is recruiting at an elite level. That position room has been unmatched for a couple of years. I don't think any signs of that changing anytime soon. And yeah, the NFL draft, next week, and then I would imagine next year will be just another showcase for him. As I think there's a good chance you have back-to-back first-round picks coming out of that position room. So it's a good time to be the tight ends coach at the University of Georgia.
There's no doubt about that. Well, let's transition a little bit and talk about the transfer portal. There's been some news on that front this week when it involves Georgia. They've had 4 guys go into the portal as we record this. It's like right after 12:30 on Thursday because you might be listening to this and there could be some changes on that front. But Kip, let's start with one of the guys who has not gone into the portal and talk about Brock Vandergriff. Our colleague Rusty Mansell reported on Wednesday that all indications are that Brock is that he will be in Athens this fall as he continues to push Carson Beck for a chance to start for Georgia. What was your initial reaction to that news that it looks like Brock is going to remain a Bulldog and see what he can do when it comes to this quarterback competition?
I don't think at this point there's the upside to that, to leaving now. Especially the fact that you cannot start in the SEC. I mean, you cannot play immediately in the SEC if you're to transfer. And if you were to transfer in the future, why limit your options? But I'm not surprised at all. I don't think any of us expected anyone to transfer out unless, a starter was named. And we didn't expect a starter to be named yet. The competition will continue. And the fact that he's probably going to be, to graduate this fall, allowing him, to transfer anywhere, is right there as well. That, just that carrot for him to continue competing this fall, knowing that if it doesn't work out after the season, he can go anywhere he wants to go, without any limitations. I think that was kind of always the plan. From talking that, when we got to speak to these guys during the playoff run last season, Brock said, this is exactly where, I wanted to be. And this is where I thought I would be as far as, my path to playing time. Looking at Carson Beck, seeing the time that it took him, looking at Carson Beck, like I said in the last pod, a year ago, where he was in his development, you can't just write off where you're at in year two. And I think that's kind of where Brock Vandergriff is right now, where you could see just a clear comfort level where Carson is compared to Brock. But we could see that last year with Stetson Bennett and Carson Beck. It just comes with experience and it comes with reps. And now we know how valuable those number 2 reps were for Carson Beck last season. And now who has a chance to be the number 2 quarterback this year? Well, Brock Vandergriff could be the number 2 quarterback this year, which means, again, an injury or a play away from being QB1. So I think there's just a lot of value for him to continue his development, and I think he knows that. And yeah, it's obviously good for Georgia football, because if he were to leave, I mean, they would definitely have to go, I would imagine, get someone, unless they just feel really good about the walk-on quarterbacks they have. So not really surprised by it. And, I don't think his story's been written yet. So I would definitely not write off Brock Vandergriff. He saw flashes of what he could do out there in the field. He's got the athleticism that, Gunnar Stockton can move as well, but just overall physical talent. He's the most talented quarterback in that room when you're looking just at the physical traits. You just need to get continued reps, and when the game slows down for him, he's got a bright future.
I totally agree. And I mean, I think you hit on most of the points I would have made. And it was really revealing. I think that was early April when we had a chance to talk to Carson and to Brock. And Brock was really straightforward talking about why he had stayed. And he said, look, I'm continuing to get reps. I feel like I'm getting better. He said, if I didn't have that, I probably would have left. And it just, to me, the timing doesn't make sense to leave. I don't think this job is completely sewn up for Carson Beck. I do think he's leading, given how he played at G-Day and given how Brock played. But, the thing that really strikes me is, consider this quarterback room these last few years, really not counting 2022, but 2021, 2020, 2019. How much changed from what we thought the quarterback would look like going into that season to what it wound up being? I mean, think back to Stetson Bennett going into 2021. I brought this up a ton of times. After SEC Media Days, there was a day there where JT Daniels was the betting favorite for the Heisman. Everybody was convinced that he was the guy, and he gets hurt and Stetson steps in, and the rest is history. You just don't know if you pass up this opportunity, if Brock decides to go elsewhere. Doesn't mean he couldn't succeed there, but I still think that there is the path for him to play at Georgia and for him to play a big role. And that could happen this season. I think at this point that Carson is the favorite, and I think he should be. But there's still a long way to go. And we heard plenty of good things about Brock over the course of this spring. I don't think it's a lost cause. And again, given the timing, given you couldn't leave for an SEC team, you could try to get a waiver, but that's not guaranteed. I think it just makes all the sense in the world to just stay put.
And 3 years ago, we had Jamie Newman as the QB1, and their, Heisman odds and Pro Football Focus just lapping all kinds of praise upon him. And, Dwan Mathis starting the season, against Arkansas as well as QB1. Yeah, I think as we record this podcast in April, going ahead and locking in someone as Georgia's starting quarterback this season is, yeah, it's a little, putting the cart before the horse for sure. I think there's still plenty of practice, plenty of development, and plenty of curveballs that could be thrown their way. So, if you're Brock Vandergriff, you're right there. You're in it. You've been competing. And I mean, again, if what Kirby Smart says to be believed, I mean, he's been rotating in with the ones and getting, valuable practice time. And so we all said that we would overreact to G-Day, and here we are. We've already anointed, Carson Beck as the starter. And I think I don't think that's the way that this works. And all we could say is that Beck had the best day in one practice of 15, and there are plenty more to go. So it makes sense for Brock to continue pushing on, knowing that what's happened at Georgia the last couple of years means that, it's up there for grabs, and it could definitely be him this fall.
If I had $1 for every time I've said that was one of 15 practices this week, Kip, I'd be a very rich man. I can guarantee you that. We will take a quick break, come back, talk a little bit more about the other portal news involving Georgia, and then just talk a little bit on the recruiting side for the Dogs. Welcome back, everybody. Well, so to this point, as we record this, there have been 4 Georgia players who have gone into the portal. Bear Alexander, who we talked about after the G-Day podcast that we did, along with Sean Washington, who had left the program before spring, Ryan Davis, inside linebacker, a veteran, and Griffin Scroggs, who was a redshirt freshman offensive lineman. Kip, does anything stand out between those guys who have gone in at this point, and any other general thoughts you have about the portal when it comes to Georgia, and as far as guys who could wind up leaving, or also a position or two they may decide to go after?
Well, unless there are, more than 3 guys not on first-year scholarships coming in with this class, we know that there are more, more departures set to happen. I think we have them at 88 scholarship players right now. Correct me if I'm wrong there. And, there is still the possibility that linebacker CJ Washington at some point is put on medical scholarship due to the injury that he suffered that he is yet to be cleared from. But right now, I think, this is normal off-season attrition. I know that, the numbers kind of, make it look like there's a mass exodus, but we've seen this happen the last couple of years where it's going to be double digits every offseason. And Georgia's there right now. I think with Ryan Davis, that was definitely, a guy that they would probably prefer to have on the team. He helped them last year when they needed it due to injury, came up with a couple big plays, sealed the win for them as well. I think, but you have to look at that room and acknowledge that we've talked about the guys that have come in, the young guys, Raylan Wilson, CJ Allen. These guys are going to be tough to keep off the field. And with the 2 starters they have coming back and Smile and Pop, as well as a guy, guys like Xavier Sori and Jalen Walker trying to get in certain packages as well. It's a deep room. And so for Ryan Davis, senior, that transfer portal provides him an opportunity to maybe get a clearer path to playing time. So it's just the natural course of action. On the flip side, I mean, the one thing that we kind of saw in the spring game in G-Day is Georgia could probably use another running back. A lot of guys injured. One scholarship running back out there. Got to see plenty of Roderick Robinson, the true freshman. But, had a bunch of guys banged up. So even with, all the guys leaving, Georgia adding 3 guys via the transfer portal. If another if a running back enters the portal in the next I think 10 days, I think May 1st is the deadline. Not to pick your destination, but you have to be in the portal by May 1st. So if a running back that can help Georgia enters the portal in the next 10, 11 days, they're definitely going to look into it and probably pursue. I would imagine, just because you've seen that they could be banged up real easily at that position. You always think, oh, they've got so many running backs, and then a couple guys get banged up, and now we're seeing some walk-ons out there who, I mean, Cash Jones, those guys did pretty well out there, but I think for SEC play, you want to make sure you have enough guys out there to get through the gauntlet. So not surprised by any of the departures. And again, there could still be a guy or two that they add to the program as well. So this roster is not done as far as, the attrition and maybe with the additions.
Looking at the portal, I would say the 2 positions that I'm interested in just seeing if Georgia has any departures is going to be wide receiver and also offensive line, which you did have one with Griffin Scroggs, but they are just so deep at receiver. I could see some of these guys deciding that, they are best suited to play elsewhere, and we will see if that comes to pass. And then offensive line as well. You've got a few guys that have been in the program now for quite a while, and, they have a good feel for where their standing is. This is really just speaking vaguely. There's no specific people that we know of or are aware of that are getting ready to go into the portal, but you just look at how deep they are. And like Kim mentioned, there is that number you've got to get to. I would imagine that those 2 positions could be a couple that we see some attrition at. And then, like you said, running back, I'm really, really fascinated to see what they do because you did have Roderick Robinson. I think he took 11 carries at G-Day. You saw Dejon Edwards out there, but he really didn't do a whole lot. He's been banged up some this spring. And you kind of have to weigh the factors of, okay, is it worth giving a scholarship to another running back? Or do we like what we got and feel like we're going to get healthy? And it's a gamble because, you look at these, year to year, how much that position gets worn on over the course of a season. And you don't want to be in a position where you absolutely have to give a guy like Cash Jones or Savon Clark a bunch of carries, say, against Tennessee or against Kentucky, against Florida, in some really big moments. I mean, they're capable guys, but can they perform at that level? You really just don't want to find out. Don't want to have to find out that answer. So we'll be fascinated what they do there. And the thing to remember, too, with running back, they're going to be breaking in a new starting quarterback. So if they can make that a position where if they're in really tough situations, they can say, all right, this is, we're in a hostile environment, but we're going to kind of ease our quarterback in. We're going to hand the ball off some to a running back, let him get 5-6 yards of carry and kind of get everybody settled in. You want to have those options because if you don't, you're kind of going to have your back against a wall, and definitely not something you want to do, especially with a first-time starting quarterback in front of them.
Yeah, I think it's clear that, if Georgia can add a running back, I think they will. But again, they're just not going to add one to add one. Like you said, it's got to be someone that they think can help them win football games, someone that falls in line with the talent level they already have in the backfield. And, if not, they're going to roll with what they got. And guys that are banged up right now, we expect them to be ready for fall camp. And Andrew Paul working his way back from ACL surgery last August. I think the injuries to Kendall Milton with the hamstring and Branson Robinson with the foot, we don't expect those to linger too far into preseason camp. So, maybe they're confident with what they have, and you're right. But if there's a scholarship available and the right running back hits that portal, don't be surprised if Georgia goes after him and makes a heavy push.
Want to make sure and shout out Jason Cancel, who's watching on YouTube. Hello from Hong Kong. We have gone international. I'm very proud of what the Junkyard Dawgcast has accomplished today. Jason had a few recruiting questions. And I want to talk more broadly about recruiting and really this time of year. Rusty had mentioned earlier this week that the coaches are going to stay off the road this week, but next week it's really going to ramp up. A lot of evaluations as they look to future classes. Kip, how important is this time of year for these coaches and what they're doing with the upcoming classes and kind of setting the stage for ultimately what those classes will look like once we get there?
Yeah, it's technically the evaluation stage. So you get, 2 opportunities to see each prospective student athlete, and usually one of those is kind of an academic visit. The other one you can watch them work out, watch them in practice. It's big. You get opportunity on one side to show your priority guys, your early on guys that are high on your board, that they're important. And so if you have let's say a 5-star wide receiver, Ryan Wingo in St. Louis, if Brian McClendon goes and sees him next Monday, the first day he's out on the road, well, that's probably gonna, he's going to notice that. And I think Brian McClendon will probably make sure he knows that. A guy that Georgia's got some momentum on. A couple crystal ball picks came in recently with Ryan Wingo, and when you're also trending for the number 1 overall prospect in the country, in Dylan Raiola, if you bring in the number 1 quarterback and Ryan Wingo is close to him, that's just one of those dominoes that you could have in recruiting. So it's big to visit these guys. And then also there's the other aspect of it, and that's the summer camps, summer prospect camps for Georgia. So what Georgia coaches are also going to do is make sure that they get invites out to these guys. So you're visiting these schools, you're telling the coaches, hey, make sure he, Cameron Fountain gets to Georgia on June 1st. The edge guy from Booker T. Washington, Atlanta, or guys who don't even have an offer, but they've heard good things about. They're going to go school to school to make sure they get those guys in camp so they can get a better eval. A lot of the coaches think, that's their best evaluation tool is working with them hands on. And so you're going to see a lot of these guys get there to camp, and a lot of times you'll see guys shoot up the board, guys that we haven't even talked about yet. Last year, that's exactly what happened with Zeke Haynes. He came into town and made the coaches move him up the board because of his workout. And they're like, we got to bring this guy back. Is this guy for real? And they did. And they're like, okay, we got to take this guy. And it also happened with Joshua Miller, the offensive lineman that came in and earned an offer. That's what this evaluation period is. If a guy catches the coach's eye, they want to get him at camp and work with him and verify that what they're seeing is legit. So it's big in that aspect as well. And so they're going to use every visit they can over the next month to set themselves up, not only with the guys they're already after, but also some guys they want to get better evaluations on.
We'll have that covered as well as all that's going on, and we see where these coaches are headed and who they are headed to see. There's no doubt about that. Before we wrap up this episode, Georgia men's basketball minute. Some big news on Monday. Georgia gets R.J. Melendez, a 6'7" forward who started his career at Illinois, a native of Puerto Rico. He has had a pretty good career there with the Fighting Illini. Had dealt with a shoulder injury last year that limited him a little bit. I think he averaged a little bit over 8 points per game as a sophomore. If you are listening to this, you can go to Dawgs 247. I wrote a story earlier this week, really looking at RJ's game, seeing what he brings to the table. And I got to say, I really like what I saw. There's plenty of things he can improve on. I think his defense is an area that he's going to have to improve, but a really nice shooter. I think a guy that can play that 3, maybe the 4, and bring some offensive production, which I think this is something that this team as it stands really lacks. They got to have guys who can score. He played really, really well in the second half against Arkansas. Was a big reason why Illinois kept that game close and had Arkansas. It's about a 7 or 8 point game going down to the final minutes, and Arkansas closed it out. But I think it's a really nice pickup, the first of the offseason for Mike White and company. And it's just a matter of adding to it. They're going to need some guard help. They desperately need a center to add to this team. But I think R.J. Melendez is going to play some real meaningful minutes when we get to the season. And fascinated to see what else they're able to get and add to as they try to take a step forward in year 2 under Mike White.
Need some bigs. They got to win that battle on the boards.
No doubt. And they've had the center from South Florida was here last week, along with RJ. and also Amari Abram from Ole Miss. So you'd like to see if they can land all three of those guys. I think that would be huge. But they've got, I believe, 5 scholarships still open. So they've got room to add to this roster, and they really, really need to add to this roster if they're going to be competitive, because they lost some big time playmakers on last year's team.
Yeah, I saw that. I was checking out our transfer portal rankings and saw that a couple of those guys were inside the top 50, but I think Georgia's in on some good guys. If they're able to land the guys you said, I think that'll bode really, really well for this program. That first offseason, so crucial for Coach White. And we've seen just so much changeover after that first year with new coaches. You need some consistency, but also got to continue to upgrade that overall talent. I don't know if they take the next step in this second year, maybe some postseason basketball for the Hoop Dogs.
We'll be there if it happens, and keep you guys all up to date on what goes on with the portal, with the basketball team, but also with the football team, and stay busy covering this off season. And I'm sure next week, Kip and I will probably do a podcast before the draft talking about what we expect to see there. Busy time of year, but a fun time of year, and we're looking forward to covering every minute of it for you guys. We are going to wrap up this episode. For Kip Adams, I'm Jordan Hill. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Until next time, take care.